So is there any member of the public that wants to make testimony today? Okay, hearing none, we'll get to the next item on the agenda, which is the legislative report. So we listed several bills here in case members wanted to discuss any of them. There are two in particular that we want to take time to discuss today. The first one is SB 2516, which renames the Chief Information Officer as the Deputy Comptroller for Information Technology. Now, actually, there is a Senate Bill 2516 SD2 that changed the bill to say that the name would stay Chief Information Technology and add the term and Deputy Comptroller. But there's still other things in that bill that we should discuss. So we'll start with that one, and let me bring up a slide. Okay, you should now be seeing the slide that says SB 2516 SD2 options. So the things the bill changed, it did rename the Chief Information Officer as the Deputy Comptroller for Information Technology, but that was changed in the second version, SD2, so that now it's the Chief Information Officer and Deputy Comptroller. But the bill also changes the status of the CIO. So presently, the status quo is the CIO reports to the governor, but ETS exists within DAGs under the comptroller. The bill would allow the comptroller to appoint and fire the CIO instead of the governor. And normally, deputy directors are appointed by the governor and confirmed by the Senate. So it's kind of an unusual situation. Historically, ETS has been treated as an administratively attached agency within DAGs. And so one of the things I would recommend in our testimony is that we add the language administratively attached to clarify that status quo has worked well and would be appropriate. The second issue in the bill, it limits the salary of the CIO to a deputy department head, which will be $165,000 in July of 2024. I have salaries of the governor and the comptroller there. The excluded managerial system, which covers some employees in the state, has a maximum limit of $222,000. The current CIO is at a salary of about $220,000. So, the questions we have here are: who should the CIO report to, and should the salary be limited to a deputy department head level or some other amount? And then there's a third issue that we could address, and that is whether we would want the ITSC to be a board or commission in charge of the CIO instead of an advisory group. If it were a board or commission, it would require the appointment of the members by the governor and confirmation by the Senate. It would reduce the selection by members by the legislature, and it might require financial reporting by the members of the future board or commission. So these are the issues I wanted to raise for discussion, and I will open the floor to anything anybody wants to talk about or any questions you have. Or if you're raising your hand, I see, looks like Joel. Go ahead.
Yeah, so the first item about reporting to the comptroller, which would make this position very unique as far as administratively being under the comptroller to hire and fire.
Right.
But would that also restrict the capabilities of the CIO and the whole department to now be under the control of the comptroller? In other words, further hog tying your capability for getting things done?
Yeah, that's a good question. Right now, the CIO and ETS has pretty broad independence to be able to go out and help whichever department needs help and work on whichever projects it thinks are most important. Our resources are not really available to DAGs unless DAGs is on the top of the list. So if the comptroller is in charge of ETS, then potentially those kinds of things would need the approval of the comptroller.
Thank you.
Garrett, you have a question or comment?
Thanks, Doug. And I think, don't forget, I think Marcus was up there as well.
Okay.
A couple of quick comments. So this, and I'm implying, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but having the CIO report to the comptroller, and I think you currently sit on, or sit in at least on the majority of governor's cabinet meetings. It effectively takes the role of IT out of what I think is currently considered the place that it needs to sit, which is in the executive cabinet, and then places it as a subordinate to one of the departments. So it would be in the corporate environment, it would be instead of the execs that manage and operate an organization, it puts the CIO effectively as part of the facilities organization, or an organization that's typically considered to have a facility/supporting role. So, the level of authority, both actual and perceived, I think, is significantly changed in this. I think most of you know what my thoughts are related to compensation. Just FYI, for those that haven't seen, the city just posted recruitment for its CIO. Mark Wong is retiring at the end of the year, and I think it posted a number that was quite a bit higher than 165 for city and county CIO. Thanks, Doug.
Yeah, I think I saw that one was 187. Okay, we have another comment.
Yeah, hey, Doug, this is Marcus. So, along the lines of what Garrett folks, I think they captured a good portion of what my comment was going to be around, just the structure of it from being administratively attached. And, does the realignment change at the core what the spirit of ETS really is meant to be, right? And how does it, change that from that perspective? Because the technology purpose, and as far as ETS goes, is really around advisory roles throughout the entire state, and not just on some of these other types of projects. And I think, subjugating it to the comptroller is the wrong direction for us to go. I think that we were trying to get a lot more consolidation across the board. We've seen in the past where many departments had their own visions, their own budgets, and the outcome was less than ideal. And I think we're making the right directions, or strides in the right directions. And I think this takes us back, to a place where it's less than favorable. So I think that would be my commentary on the first portion. And then, Garrett touched on it. I was going to bring up, the city and county position with Mark, and the ability, and the difficulty to recruit even at the current salary. I would state that, in the private sector, at the current salary, for someone that's being asked to come in and to take on the task of what, of what the current CIO role is within ETS, and have that knowledge. And it's further complicated because this is a public position across multiple domains, and be able to navigate that successfully. I would say that even at the current salary, that's a significant challenge, right? Being in the private sector, I can say that when we go to recruit, there are individuals that are significantly less, carrying less burden and weight in what their roles are, that are paid very competitively to this rate, right, in their current roles. So I would say that, taking it down to that 165K, I'm not quite sure what you would attract into that area, right? And so it would further exacerbate that recruitment and retention of this role. So that's, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I think that is the big concern. And Mai, you have a comment?
It's a comment and a question, because by putting the CIO under the director, the controller, like what is the leverage that ETS would have to perform certain work? I mean, I've seen a lot of consolidation of like security and a lot of statewide kind of executive work, which, because it has the seal of approval of the governor, I'm assuming you're getting a lot of support. But by moving now the position removed from the governor, what would be your ability to actually move forward with some of those standardization kind of consolidations?
Right. Well, that's a good point. Right now, usually the things that allow us to do the centralization and central strategy and governance either come from the statute or they come from an administrative directive signed by the governor. So we could still get an administrative directive from the governor's office. It would just have to go through the comptroller on the way, which perhaps it would anyway. So I guess there's a way to have the same kind of influence, but I do think that having the CIO be independent and reporting to the governor helps stop arguments about whether departments should or shouldn't comply with what the CIO is asking or recommending. So it's a good point. Michael, looks like you have your hand up.
Yeah, I got a quick question. I took a look at the bill, and it seems like the duties that you currently, or the duties of the CIO currently is almost the same as it's going to be in the future under the deputy controller. You still report to the governor on the IT strategic plans and all that stuff. So all it is an organizational change. And to me, it doesn't make sense that if that was the case, the controller would be the one to report to the legislature on the IT initiative, because I mean, that the CIO would fall under the comptroller, and they would be the one to report the status of IT. My feeling is that IT in this day and age is an enabler of technology. It helps the organization, or in this case, the government, build or become better using technology. And if you put it under the controller, I don't know if that's going to always be the case. It's more of a cost center kind of approach versus an enabler of technology.
That's a very good point, and I think if we think something should receive funding and the comptroller doesn't agree, under the current status, it still goes forward to BNF and the governor to look at, but I think in this situation, the comptroller would be able to say, no, I don't want to spend money on that. I want to spend money on something else. So it could really affect the strategic direction of ETS, and we could become more like a cost center and less like a strategic asset to the state.
Right.
Doug?
Yes.
I don't know. I don't have my hand up. I don't know where the hand is. Yeah, I'd like to, I want to thank everybody for your comments. I think that was the concern that I had with this bill. And it's an organizational or reorganizational bill, which has a lot of, I think, adverse outcomes, or could be adverse outcomes. Number one, I think all of you mentioned the salary. We have a huge system, I think the biggest system in the state. And we really do have a number of departments that do their own thing. And we've been trying for the last several years to consolidate as much as we can. So in terms of cybersecurity, those kinds of things are easily given up to Doug's shop. But others where there really should be, and happy that we now have a chief governance officer, is really looking at what kinds of things we as an employer across the board should be doing and being more efficient with what we do. So it comes, I guess, we're also as a legislature quite reactionary. So when things happen, we try to say, okay, we're going to correct it by doing something. And in this case, it was a restructuring. Okay, let's put OETS under the comptroller. It sits administratively attached now, but if you put the OETS under the comptroller, then OETS must report to the comptroller, and the comptroller would have stopped some of the problem that we saw, when in fact the problem was from the comptroller as being a user department to a staff department. So I think it's the understanding of what the process is maybe is not so clear. So in hearing your comments, I would strongly urge that if it is brought up for hearing in the House, that you folks would voice your opinions, because I think that most of us don't understand how OETS is operating or should be operating as a staff agency to user departments, and that we put the responsibility, the funds went to OETS in that case. And so the responsibility went to OETS, when in fact, what came out in the briefing on that project was that the user departments should have been much more involved with their users developing the program. So I think there are a number of things that you've brought up, which I think are really important to be brought up at the hearing, to see what and if there should be a change. I think one of the options that is presented here is that if in fact the problem is having a oversight or somebody or some organization that OETS, the CIO, reports to, and so a problem like the $8 million project would have been caught by many eyes, I guess, and stopped earlier, so I think that's where the concern comes. My concern also is with the salary and it's absolutely correct that the 165,000 limit would not attract the caliber that we want in a CIO. So there are a number of issues that you've brought up, all very cogent, all very, very important if we are to make this kind of major change. What I would suggest, if in fact that is the case of having a entity to report to, it could be the suggestion that there be an ITS. The ITSD would be the actual board, but that would mean, a number of issues come up with the board. You have to have advice and consent, so it's not totally free to add people that are good and that you want on the board, because now there is financial disclosure and a number of things that come up with that. But I think that might be, what other boards do when an agency is administratively attached. So, so I put that before you because you've brought up these issues, and I think that it would really be helpful because you are there in the field, so that you can provide that perspective to us as we start looking at this bill more closely, and what would the implications of that be if we made the change. It's not just as simple as moving this box under that box. So so I would really urge all of you, especially those who had really good comments about the impact of changing the one box under or over another box. So I imagine I think that's my contribution to making sure that we don't make changes that we might regret.
Thank you, Senator. And you did bring up, and I should say that, so this bill has passed through the Senate and is going to the House now. So the issue before us today is, you know, if this bill gets heard in the House, then we would testify, ETS will testify. And the question is whether the ITSC would like to testify uniformly or as individuals. And so we can reach that discussion coming up here in a little bit. But I think I saw Candace Parks' hand up.
Hi, I'm sorry. Doug, I did not have a chance to read the bill, but is the last bullet point an option? Is that proposed in the bill, or that's just something you put out for discussion?
You mean
No.
the ITSC to a border commission? That one?
Yes, yes.
That is not in the bill right now.
Okay.
But it's something that could be offered. And I should say that, you know, there maybe was a perception that there's a lack of oversight of the CIO, but the CIO reports to the governor. And I can assure you that Governor Green and Governor Ige both provided plenty of oversight of what ETS was doing and the direction we needed to go. So there's not a lack of oversight. It's just not, you know, probably as day to day as it would be if the comptroller were providing the oversight.
I just wanted to comment that I would I agree with all the positive comments that were made, and I disagree. I mean, not disagree, but I would not support changing ITCS to a border commission, because unless you get an exemption from the Sunshine Law, because it's really difficult to get anything done if you are um, under the Sunshine Law, as you know already. So that would just be my comment. In addition to um, supporting all of the positive comments that have been said so far. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anybody else like to make a comment?
You have Christine.
Thank you.
Christine, yes, thank you.
Yes. Thank you. I have a question and a comment, Doug. I think you might have answered the first question is, how do you set the strategic direction for the state IT strategy? And maybe that, I know you have a lot of conversation with the governor and the previous governor, but is that how the strategy is set? Or like you said, is it kind of day to day? So that's sort of related to the scope of ETS. So that's a question. And then as you're thinking about that, I actually put a link in the chat that connects people to, you may have been referring to it, but the National Association for State CIOs had a report on governance, and about half of the states that have cabinets, the CIO sits on the cabinet. And the CIO is appointed by the governor, but some of those states also have the CIO working with a board that is appointed by the governor as well. So the CIO really worked with the board to give you, Doug, or whoever the CIO is, some support in some ways like the ITSC is, but you have the visibility of a cabinet member. About half the states kind of have that. So that may be something kind of we should explore in the future, but I'm just reflecting on, you know, the original bill, SB 2516, may have been created to solve maybe a short-term problem, but the longer-term systemic challenges of who does the CIO report to, and should the CIO have a board, you know, are just some questions that have surfaced in the past. So I don't know where that fits in. You know, addressing the short-term concerns aside, there's still some of the longer-term concerns of the role that a board could play and the role that ITSC plays right now. So those are long comments. But anyway, back to the first question of how is the state IT strategy set? Does the governor have a heavy hand in that, or is that, how do you establish that?
That's a good question. I would say it depends on the governor. And in my experience, they have been very interested in the CIO's, work product in terms of what we're recommending. So governors have a million things to figure out, and
Yeah.
T-strategy is something where they've been comfortable with what we've recommended for them. But our strategic planning process needs to be very collaborative and include the departments and the community and maybe the legislature. That's why we report the strategic plan to the legislature and of course to the governor and the governor's office. So that's the best answer I can give you. It's a very collaborative process that many people play a role. In the end, it's the CIO's strategic plan, really. So that the CIO is ultimately accountable for the contents.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. We have any other comments on 2516?
Yeah, this is Joel.
Hi, Joel.
So camping on what Christine said, I was looking at the chief data officer that just came on board and reporting to you. And from a strategic standpoint, it seems like pushing the CIO down pushing the CIO position down under the controller kind of negates the whole effect of getting a enterprise-wide strategy going for the state, where it now becomes more of a instead of an executive role, it becomes more of a staff level role. So I kind of see that being part of the challenge with the structure. But the second part is working with DHS and some of the other departments, having an EPMO or project management office that oversights the projects and works with the IVNV and kind of manages things a little bit better because they're focused on that aspect of watching over the projects. It would seem to me that it would make more sense to have a EPMO or project management office maybe under the controller watching the finances and working with the IVNV along with the CIO to make sure that these projects stay on track. Because each department, some departments, because of their funding, they have their EPMOs within their departments or divisions, as opposed to a state level EPMO. Is that
right?
Yeah.
Oh,
Does that make
that's a good
sense?
thought. I think there needs to be a relook at what's in ETS and what's in DAGs. And actually, this is interesting because when I was comptroller back in the day, was when ETS was created. And it was created by merging OIMT, which was an attached agency, and ICSD, which was a division of DAGs that had a lot of operating equipment and software kind of jobs. So, and I understand why all that was done. And as comptroller, I thought it was a good thing because I thought the merger of the two created some critical mass that you couldn't get any other way. And over time, as roles in ICSD have become, obsolete, perhaps, those people have been able to be shifted into more modern projects or activities by ETS. So we shift people into cybersecurity and into web programming and other things like that as it is allowed, or funding even. And on the other hand, we use staff on the governance side to help with things like the mainframe and modernization of projects. So it's had a good symbiotic effect. But it may be that some things that are in ETS maybe shouldn't be. For example, we have the ERP program office in ETS, and that could be under the comptroller, especially as their project right now is to replace the state's accounting system. So we're going to have that discussion about maybe reorganizing some things to try and make it more efficient and give people what they need to get the job done.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else have anything they'd like to say about 2516?
Testify.
Yes, testify.
If it comes up, all of you have good ideas, you know, and the impact of this for our state, having a strategic, information technology program that actually can deal with all the state departments at the cabinet level is really critical. As we go forward, we're talking about AI and you know, all the new technologies. It really does help to have a staff organization that keeps on top of those things and instructs and guides the various departments as one of you said, you know, just does their own thing and they all have their own programming, but there should be some way in which all of that gets coordinated, and that's what we've been trying to do for the last several years. So it would be really helpful to hear the comments that you raise in testimony, should this bill come up in the House.
Great. Yes, I
So
think
then-
we're going through a period of exponential change in technology right now that is different than we've seen for a while. So it is important to have high-level leadership. Christine, you have a
Yes.
comment?
Yes, thank you, Doug. I'm looking at SB 2516, and in section 1, it says that within the Department of Accounting and General Services, the Office of the OETS was established. Is there a reason why ETS is not its own department or agency, versus being under by statute? Unless I'm interpreting it incorrectly, the bill says that ETS is under DAG, so that part gets a little fuzzy, I think, for people like me. So
Candace, do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, by statute, the state can only have so many departments. And so I think we're nearing the limit. So it's very common that a very important department like ETS will have to be administratively attached to an existing department in order to stay under that limit.
okay, and are there certain rules that ETS has to follow or reporting requirements for ETS if they're administratively attached to DAGs? And that might be part of some of the challenge, or can they function pretty independently?
Doug?
Yeah, the practice going back to when I was comptroller at least, and maybe before that, was that ETS was, and OIMT before it was treated like an administratively attached agency because of the governor's interest in trying to move technology forward and get all the benefits of that for the state. So, but the words were left out, obviously, when the statute was written. So in my testimony, I plan on recommending they add those words to clarify, to form the law to the practice that's been in place.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. And that, I think that's a reason why we weren't called the Enterprise Technology Division, which is what you would normally call a part of DAGS. You know, we were called the Office of Enterprise Technology Services because we were thought of as different, kind of like the State Procurement Office. Their statute does actually have the words administratively attached. And I think they're just missing from what was written. Michael, did you have a hand up?
Yeah, no, I got a quick question. I know that we had discussed whether we write a testimony from ITSC or you can do it individually, but I know, Christine, you wrote one for SB 2287. That's another bill that was shown on the agenda. But I'm not familiar with the process of testimony, whether it's in person or a letter.
Right. James, can you speak to that a little bit? Maybe I lost James.
James, you're on mute, James. Thank you.
I'm sorry. Yes, I can help anyone with the process of testimony. It's relatively easy, but you do have to sign up. And there is a guide I can point out on the legislative website how to do it. You sign up and then give yourself a password, and then you're able to submit testimony. Now, if it's a group testimony, I possibly could do it through ETS. We have already set up a login so that we can provide testimony. So whichever way you guys decide to go, I can either help you individually or I can post it as a group, whichever is, decided here today.
We can send you a link to the page, and you can actually testify when you fill out the form. You can actually type your testimony right into the form, or you can attach a letter to it if you prefer. And you also, when you're doing that, you say whether you plan on testifying in person or online, or not at all in terms of oral testimony. So all those options are made available to you when you submit your testimony on the legislature's website at capitol.hawaii.gov. And James will be happy to help you because he does it all day for me.
That's right.
Hey, Doug.
Yes.
The thought came, that showing solidarity as a group, would that have more impact if we created one consolidated testimony from the steering committee, where we would all contribute to it, sign it, and collectively show that we are a group as opposed to individually testifying?
We can do that. We probably would have to have another meeting to discuss the actual testimony. But I'm not against that. We will share with you the draft of my testimony or ETS's testimony as well. The other thing we could do is if there's an agreement among the ITSC, we could talk to that in my testimony. But I think it does make better sense for it to be either from you as a group or from you individually. I think there's strength in numbers, so sometimes having each person testify is even better, to say everybody supports this. And some of you may be less comfortable than others, or may be in a position where it's hard for you to take a strong stand on this. So I think I'm inclined to give you the ETS's testimony and let you be able to cite to it.
Okay, thank you.
As individuals.
I would suggest, because you all have different ideas, some of them very good. And all of you are members of the ITSC, but I don't think we know what ITSC is. So I think it would be helpful, maybe not as a board, because it will take you some time to now come back together and approve the testimony. But if you could then say, I sit on the ITSC, and maybe in that little intro to say what ITSC is, that we are an advisory group, because it does show that there is input to what Doug does, So I think that might be helpful. Not everybody use the same language, but at least as an individual representing one sector of the technology industry, or like Garrett in terms of UH, everybody has their perspective that they bring to the advisory council to advise Doug and what he does. So I think that also is helpful to see that he's just not doing it on his own. And, there are eyes and ears with him as he does the strategic planning, or as he does do some of these projects. So I think it might be helpful, just with the timing as well, to have you individually, if you so desire, to submit testimony and say, I am part of a ITSC, and what it is and why it's important to you.
All right. Thank you, Senator. James, you have something?
I just wanted to add that the bill testimony doesn't have to be turned in until it's assigned to a committee. And the bill was assigned to committees today. It's got a triple referral to 3 different groups.
Which is a good sign, by the way.
That is a good sign, yes. But I can alert the group when it is actually assigned to a committee. And then you have 40, they give 48 hours notice, and that's how much time you have to submit the testimony
What is the
before the
committee?
hearing.
James, what committees?
It's higher education and government operations in one. The second one is consumer protection, and then finally finance. Thank you.
Okay, I want to take a minute to talk about this other bill that had implications directly for the ITSC, and that was 2287 SD1, which requires the ITSC to assist the CIO to develop a plan to enhance the mobile application developed for public access, or for the public to access the state's website. So to give you a little bit of background on that one, right now, there are 6 named responsibilities of the ITSC, and this bill would add a 7th one, which is to assist the Chief Information Officer develop a plan to enhance the Hawaii.gov mobile application to increase visitor and resident usage of the mobile application. Now, actually, there is not a mobile application per se right now. What we have is that our web pages are developed in a mobile friendly format. So that if you go to any of the Hawaii.gov websites, you should get a very nice presentation on your phone or your iPad, just like you would on your computer, except phone friendly. So I encourage any of you to test that. But I guess the bottom line is I can't think of a reason to object to having the ITSC involved in this area. And I think it could be helpful to have your perspective on whether we should consider having an actual mobile application. We generally don't do that because we don't want to make people download something onto their phones. And there are some complexities with getting approval from Apple and Android, systems to get applications approved for them. But there are ways that we could do it. So, but that's a discussion for another day. The question today really is whether we have any objection to having this added to the ITSC list of things. Christine, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Doug. I had my hand up for the previous bill, which is if it's possible for ETS to provide a description of the IT steering committee so that we all use the same one in the testimony, that would be helpful. So we're not using different descriptions of the ITSC. So if that's possible, just even if it's a few sentences, that would help us to make sure that we're consistent across the members.
Absolutely,
And
do that.
thank you. And then regarding this bill, this just brings up a larger question of, as an ITSC member, I try to take my role seriously as a member, but I don't know what assist means. I don't know what ITSC members are accountable for. We're not asked to make any decisions. We're just asked to provide input, I guess. And so a lot of that burden, Doug, falls back on you to ask us, I guess, for input or, or clarify what the expectations are of the ITSC so that we make sure we give you and the state, whoever is supporting this bill, the information that we need. And so assist seems very general to me. I don't really know what that means. So I don't want to not meet an expectation that's implied there, especially with this new addition.
Right. Yeah, I think some of the things on the list are expecting more out of the ITSC than you would expect out of volunteers. So it might be advising the Chief Information Officer would be a better terminology than assisting, because I don't really expect you to come down and help us program the thing. So that's a good point. And we can recommend that in testimony. Otherwise, does anybody have any objection to this being added to the list of ITSC goals? Okay, I'm not hearing any. So Is there any other bill that anybody would like to discuss as a group that's on the list? Okay, doesn't sound like there's anything else.
Doug, I know that there is a lot of effort spent. I see the IT consolidation, and so there's a lot of effort and resources put into the IT consolidation report. And so, can you just provide an update since there is a bill out there? I don't know if we could be helpful related to that, but is the report done? And so, what is the status of the IT consolidation report?
The report is done. It was provided to the legislature before the session started. It is on our website under reports to the legislature, so you're welcome to go look at it. Staff, ETS staff and department staff did it. We didn't have any consultants or anybody like that hired to help. Could have been a $2 million study, but it was a free study. So that's kind of, but I think they did a great job of looking at other options and where the best opportunities are. And one of the things we recognize that there are some things that we could do, but it would require an investment in some additional technology. For example, we don't manage all the computers of the executive branch right now. They each do their own. Some of them have ServiceNow, some of them have something else, some of them have nothing. We do manage the cybersecurity of all the computers in the executive branch. So that's something where we've decided we want to own. But if we wanted to manage all the PCs, we would have to buy ServiceNow or some other tool. And if we wanted to have a statewide help desk and some other things like that, we require some investment up front. So we have to do some analysis to whether we could save money on some things and then be able to spend on this. So that's where we're kind of looking at, from the consolidation report, how do we realign resources to be able to do this without spending, I think it would take us 5 or 6 million to get to the centralization. And then we would get efficiencies that would come back. But in the process, there would be expenses that we would have to look at. And that is something we're trying to get ready for next legislative session, which is the first year of a biennium. So at that point, we could make a proposal for a change in the way we do business. Normally, we don't do that in the second year of a biennium because we're supposed to be status quo as we can be. And especially in a year like this, where there are such significant needs for Lahaina and other issues that the legislature is having to deal with, we didn't want to add another bill. Yeah. But yes, you can look at the report. It's online. There's a lot of great information in there. We really analyzed the state's IT infrastructure really well. Good. Everybody did a great job.
Thank you.
Okay, let me kind of summarize what I think the plan is. I will be preparing testimony for 2516, assuming it goes before the committees, and it looks like it will. I will share that. We will share that testimony with you for sure as soon as we see that come up, or as soon as we have it drafted. We're going to make some adjustments to it based on some input that you gave us today. We will not prepare testimony for the ITSC as a group, but we will encourage you to testify on the bill when it comes out, and feel free to say that you are a member of the ITSC and that you've been engaged in discussions of this issue with the group. I think that's very healthy and helpful, so that the House members can see that, it's not a one-person show. It's a group exercise with a lot of consultation and effort that goes into it. So with that, I'm prepared to adjourn the meeting unless somebody has an objection. Please feel free to contact me if you want to talk one-on-one. Eugene Chang and I had a couple of discussions last week about some issues that are important to the state. And so he's been very helpful in giving me some ideas on how we could do better. And I'm always open to that. And I talk to Christine from time to time as well. So please always feel free to reach out. All right. Without objection, we will adjourn the meeting. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Doug.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Aloha.